everybody. This is Leah and
Danielle
with Resilient Stories. Thanks for joining us for another episode. Today we have with us Kelsey Elizabeth Matthews, and we are so honored that she is here to discuss some of her contributions to Resilient Stories. Thanks for being here, Kelsey. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so thankful for the opportunity to get to work and write and collaborate with you both. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. We feel the same.
So with that, you've written a few stories for us, and I want to discuss them both in a little bit. In your story about what loving someone means, you mentioned having a traumatic childhood, and then later you wrote for us your story about abandonment and healing. You let us know more about what that childhood was like. If you had to tell viewers about one event from your childhood that impacted you the most later on in adulthood, what would it be?
That's such a tough question. I thought a lot about this, right, as I was kind of thinking about, the different things that you're going to ask and the different experiences that I've written about in some of the stories. I want to say that losing my mom was the most difficult. I mean, it's really hard for me to look at everything that's ever happened to me and pick one, right? Yeah. But unfortunately, I think that the idea when you think about abandonment, right, what I wrote about in the second piece about being a child, right? And when you're a child and your caregivers are constantly abandoning you, whether that's physically or emotionally, that does create some danger. But then in adulthood, when you're able to heal from some of those experiences, you realize that if another person abandons you, if you will, right, if they exit your life and they don't want to be in relationship with you anymore, it's not the end of the world, right? And that's something that you can kind of prepare yourself for. But even in your healthiest relationships, with people that you love and that you are close with and that are trustworthy, people die, right? And that's something that is a little bit harder to deal with. And so the emotional and physical abandonment during my childhood was difficult. But now it's like every time that I get close with someone, there's that fear of, oh my God, are they going to die? Is something going to happen to them? Right. So it's bad enough to feel and have to deal with the nervousness in relationships like, oh, is that person going to leave? Right. But leaving and dying are two different things. And so I think that the death of my mother has kind of brought me to this place of, that fear of death, or if someone gets sick, right. Or if something happens to them, is something going to happen to this person?
I really can empathize with what you said about your mom dying after kind of all of those abandonment situations that happened that you talk about in your story. We have a very similar story. And when my mom died, after I'd kind of finally been reunited with her, it had been about 6 months, and then she passed away in a car accident. And I remember thinking to myself, this is the final way you could abandon me. This was the last promise you could break, because she was like, oh, I'm not going anywhere this time, and you're gonna, live here and do this. And then she was killed in a car accident. And I remember feeling all of that, death is final, right? I can heal from some of these emotional and physical abandonments in my childhood, but now you're gone, and there's no way that I can kind of reconnect or reach, or you can even try to fulfill a promise at this point. Yeah. And so I get that, being afraid that people will die now. Yeah. Versus just leaving.
Yeah. Well, exactly. As if it wasn't bad enough before, right? As if everything else wasn't bad enough. And then, there's always that kind of, anytime you're in a toxic relationship, that fear of abandonment is kind of just intimate, right? It's kind of just there, because I think that your nervous system tells you when something is wrong in relationships. And so in unhealthy relationships, it's almost kind of normal in a sense when you're dealing with someone that's abusive or toxic to kind of fear the worst, right? But then even when you're in a healthy relationship with someone that is not going to abandon you and they've proven themselves, then it goes from, oh, is this person going to leave, to, oh no, what if this person dies? And there's almost no relief from that. So it's definitely an ongoing process of healing, but death is death, right? There's not a whole lot you can do about that. You can't always prepare. I mean, I know when my mom died, it was like, oh, well, that's it. It's over. And there's that really final peace to it, like you said, but in a lot of instances, like for me, I was kind of relieved. I was like, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. But I think that fear of losing someone by death when you're in a healthy relationship and there's real genuine love there, that's even scarier, because I have a good thing now and it can be taken away. And it's just that constant ongoing needing to do the best that you can to live in the moment, because none of us are promised tomorrow.
Right.
One of my best friends had said to me recently, she was like, you could go before me, right? Like we don't think about stuff like that, but it's true that living in the moment and just being aware and being able to be present and enjoy things while you have them is so important, because we just don't know,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so powerful. So true. Okay. So you mentioned institutional abuse in your story, and why that was especially painful. Can you elaborate just a little bit on that, on what happened and what kind of that meant for you?
Absolutely. So this has been the experiences that I had in Las Vegas. I live in Connecticut now. I moved back. This is where I'm from. And I moved to Vegas for 7 years when I went to college, when I went to UNLV. And the experiences that I had in Vegas were really the driving force behind the entire route and path that I'm on in my life right now. It really helped me find my mission and my purpose, and I healed and I evolved and I grew, but it definitely was not without anguish. It was definitely something that I never anticipated. And in a lot of ways, it was worse than anything that was ever done to me in my childhood. So for example, with my mom, I hoped for the best with my mom, but I expected the worst, right? Because I knew I was a smart kid. I'm told I'm an old soul. I'm wise for my age, right? I could see very clearly in my environment that something was horribly wrong, right? But I wanted to believe for the best, but I knew she was going to die. But when you are vulnerable and you are seeking support from institutionalized settings like a therapist or a healthcare facility or a religious institution, churches, or a university, right, in an academic institution, you go into those places with a level of trust for the professionals and the people that work in them. And unfortunately, when you think about institutions, most of them attract vulnerable people. It's mostly vulnerable people that are going into these institutionalized settings, whether it's a healthcare setting and someone is dealing with a mental health concern or a physical health concern, right? They're vulnerable and they're going to professionals, people with licenses and legal obligations to do right by them. It's the same concept with religious organizations, which to me is the most dangerous, right? Because if we have Christian people in churches who are screaming about people's salvations, but then they're misrepresenting Jesus and they are abusing people, well, those two things are counterintuitive, right? But people in churches are often very vulnerable and very easily manipulated. And so that's dangerous. And then when you think about academic institutions, now not all college students are young, like there are some adult college students, but the good majority of people that professors and faculty and academic professionals are dealing with are young people. Young people are vulnerable and impressionable just by nature, right? So
and these are children who maybe have moved to go to school somewhere else. They're not by their family. They're the first time they're ever independent, like that. My daughter just went off to college, so I empathize with this a lot. They are a very vulnerable space. They're away from all their friends and family they grew up with. Like there's a lot of, freshman year college students who really are vulnerable and struggle.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And they're going into these colleges and they're going into these departments and they're looking for safe people. Right. And so going to college is hard enough as it is when you're leaving home. Right. But then when you have a student that is away from their family and they're trying to adjust and something traumatic has happened to them, they genuinely think that their professors and the people at the school are safe people, because we are not really given any reason to think otherwise. Right. So in my experiences with the therapist, the church leader, and then the professor, right, all three of those were emotional and psychological abuse. And then there was the spiritual component right at the church, which just kind of comes with the territory. But all three of those individuals for me were very, very close relationships with people that I really saw as friends and, maternal figures, and people that I could trust and count on, and people that really impacted my life. And the first time that it happened with the therapist, that was just clearly illegal, right? Like there were boundaries and ethics that were crossed that never should have been crossed. And that lady took advantage of me, and she took advantage of that, right? And that was devastating. And it was my first experience in adulthood with what I realized was a narcissistic style of abuse, with the kind of the love bombing and the crossing of boundaries, which turned into the discard, which turned into the smear campaign. And to target somebody that is vulnerable like that is just disgusting, because it's so easy to discredit somebody that was looking for help. Right. So I went in, my mother died, and instead of helping me with my mother's death, she made me worse because of the boundaries that she crossed. And I trusted her, because you're supposed to be able to trust people like that. The church leader, same kind of concept, really sought me out. She sought me out. She didn't have a good relationship with her own daughter. And the next thing I knew, it's like, Kelsey's my adopted daughter, right? What vulnerability was she playing on? Because she knew about my mom. She knew exactly what I was looking for. I didn't seek her out. I didn't seek that out. She had a pattern of, engaging in disrespectful and abusive ways with young women. And then smear campaign, right? Same thing. And with the professor, unfortunately, that was mutual. That was a very mutual friendship that we had. And it wasn't anything inappropriate. It was, I didn't see it as inappropriate. Apparently they did, right? But it was so pure to me. And I saw a lot of myself in her. And she was like a big sister. She was somebody that was there for me when I was at my lowest. And she saved my life when I was going through a really hard time and I didn't feel like I could do it anymore. And lo and behold, when she came for the promotion that she was up for, and, stuff kind of started to hit the fan, smear campaign, right? I got the boot again, right? It was just this constant cycle of 3 abusive women professionals in 3 institutions that care more about their reputation and their well-being than that of those that they serve. And as I went through that, I realized that there were 2 patterns. One of them was my pattern, right? Because I clearly was seeking out support from maternal women in authority roles because I thought institutions were safe. And there's that pattern of those intellectual kind of people that I was seeking out, right? Because I was looking for connection and I was looking for safe people. But unfortunately, all 3 of those mimicked my childhood. But then on the other side of that, there was the institutional pattern. And that's when I woke up to institutional narcissism and institutional abuse. And what does this look like? And that has just propelled me forward. But those experiences were just, they're repulsive to me in every way, because as leaders and as a society, we really need to do better with treating people with decency and acting with integrity.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you read Kelsey's story about what it means to love somebody, you can get a little more detail about what she experienced within those institutions. So clearly you've been through a lot, right? We haven't gotten into what is exactly in your story, but we've got this sense that you had a traumatic childhood. You went through 3 very specific instances of abuse within an institution. And then you mentioned that it's kind of been the driving force for you. So what are some of the achievements and things that you've been able to do for you despite these events that you've had to live through in your life?
Yeah, so I have always been a really highly motivated, driven person. And people ask me, like, how do you do it? Where does it come from? And my answer is always God, right? God just put something in me that I just refuse to quit. Like, I just refuse to give up. And I've always been, I didn't see myself as an overachiever for a long time, but I recognize now that that's what that is. And I've actually had to heal from some of that because sometimes that becomes a trauma response. Yeah. But I think I had lots of accomplishments when I was a kid. And even despite the trauma, of my childhood, I had a lot of opportunities that my grandparents afforded me that a lot of other kids didn't. So I danced and I sang and I rode horses and I did pageants. And so from the outside looking in, it looked like I had everything, but people couldn't see what was really going on. But I think that my decision to just up and leave Connecticut at 18 years old by myself and just move to Las Vegas, because why not, right? I had friends there and I loved UNLV, and I just knew that that was my chance to get the hell out of Dodge, right? And have a chance to get out of where I was and create something for myself. And I got my first apartment there that was full of cockroaches because it was all I could afford. And I had 2 jobs and I took the bus everywhere because I didn't have a license. I didn't have a car. I didn't have anything. I just started from nothing. And I furnished my first little apartment, and I had lots of different jobs, and I had pageant titles, and I put myself through community college. And even when I was doing community college, I was so terrified that I wouldn't be able to do it because I didn't think that I was book smart. I just thought I was street smart because high school was hard for me. And then I graduated with honors, and I thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I can do this. And so then getting to UNLV and being accepted into the honors college, as much as a lot of my experiences at UNLV were painful and unfortunate, they weren't all that way, right? And so when I got to the honors college, there were people there that saw things in me that I couldn't see in myself. And that's how I ended up being nominated for the Truman Scholarship. And I won Truman, and I did a lot of work in the addiction and recovery community. I worked on statewide legislation for addiction and recovery services in Nevada. And then, of course, I won Truman, and then I won Miss Nevada Volunteer, and I graduated outstanding graduate. I had a 4.0, and I was selected as an outstanding grad for UNLV. And so I look at my list, right, of just what I accomplished between moving to Vegas and leaving Vegas. And it's God, right? Because there's no way. Obviously, I'm the vessel, right? And he tells me to do something and I do it, but I don't know how it is that I'm alive, given that I was born addicted to drugs, let alone accomplishing everything that I am, right? So when I moved back to Connecticut, I decided I'm going to start my own business. And so now I'm the founder of Phoenix Rising Coaching and Consulting, and I gave my first TEDx talk back in January. Thank you.
Yeah,
so I am now really looking to take all of the skills that I have, everything that God has blessed me with, basically, I'm trying to take it all and use it. So all of the skills and the gifts and the talents, but even the experiences, right? Because I truly believe that there is wisdom to be found. I think that there's like little nuggets of gold in every experience that we have. And if we're willing to kind of sift through the mess, we can find those. And if we're willing to learn and allow those things to help us grow and evolve as people, we come out on the other side with like tools in a tool belt that we can use to help other people. And so that's really my goal with Phoenix Rising, because I've been through this Phoenix era, right? Where I literally lost everything on the tail end of my time at UNLV. And that is still going on. Like, I still have people harassing me. It's really annoying, but it's unbelievable, right? But at the same time, I learned so much from that. And now I'm able to rise up from the ashes of everything that was lost in that season and really take everything that I have now at my disposal to help other people be able to do the same, whether that's individuals that are recovering from abuse or organizations and professionals that need help with their teams, right? I don't think that anything that I've ever been through was for nothing. And now I'm in a really good starting place to be able to take everything that I have and everything that I've learned to be able to help other people.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love how you describe it as a season, because for all things there is a season, right?
Absolutely.
And seasons can change. And I think that that's an important thing for everybody out there to remember, that this really difficult time is ultimately a season, and a new season can come,
Absolutely.
So I think that that's really beautiful. Okay, so what's one thing that you would say to other adults who've lived pretty horrific childhoods as you did? What's one message that you would want to give them?
I would say, as horrible as it was, and as much as it doesn't ever leave you, right? When we go through trauma changes people, especially in childhood, because it physically changes the way that the brain develops, it changes personality, it changes behavior, right? But I think even with that, I would say that it doesn't have to be defining for you, right? The things that you went through, whether it was during your childhood or even in adulthood when life kind of just kicks you while you're down, those things don't have to define you. In fact, I would go as far as saying that they don't define you, only if you allow them to, right? And so I think that I believe that every single individual possesses value and worth and has a purpose and things that they are meant to do during their lifetime. And I think that sometimes it's in the midst of those traumatic experiences, right? In the midst of the pain of the past that you find that purpose and you're able to find kind of what you're meant to do. And a lot of times God will allow us to go through things so that he can walk us through them and out of them. And then we have the opportunity to go back in and pull people out. And so if I could say anything, no matter where you are on your journey or in your life, what you went through does not have to define you.
Mhm.
And you are a worthy individual. You're as a human being, you have value and you have worth, even despite what you went through, even despite the people that told you that you didn't, right? And even if you can't see it in yourself, I guarantee you that there are people that see it in you. And no matter how it feels right now, you have something to offer the world. And so I would just say that, you know, what you went through doesn't define you.
We
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Matthews, thank you for being here. And if you haven't read Kelsey's story, the link for that will be below
Both of
in
them.
the
2 links.
yeah, I'm sorry, both of her stories. So beautiful, so powerful. You definitely want to check those out. So the links for those will be in our show notes. And we just really appreciate you being here to share with us, Kelsey. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.